At FIT-TV, we define parentectomy as the process of removing parents through the actions of divorce laws. Being a parent is your birthright, your goal, your stated purpose in life. And then, sometimes there's a family court divorce, where the baton can no longer be passed in confidence, where we are not taught and you cannot prepare for the brute force war games ahead, working against you and your family in a family court somewhere close to hell. There is no baseline sharing of custody, so draw swords and let the battle begin. I have with me to discuss what it's like to be removed as a parent, somebody who has, and that's Gary Jacobs, your victim of the legal failures in courts. Let's give us a quick little reminder of what happened to you.
Well, about 7 years ago, my now ex-wife and I were not getting along, and I decided to file for divorce. Everything that I had heard and you see on the news is that the courts are always concerned with the best interest of the child, and you always hear about how families are so important, and it's called family court, so you think they would be there to support families. When I got to the court, I realized that it was, as you said, it was actually just war, and each one of us had a lawyer, and the lawyer was there to destroy the other party. I said, okay, we'll go forward, and I guess the best parent will win. In order to determine the best parent, the courts ended up appointing forensic psychologists. 2 times we've had that, over 7 months of evaluations of my family, going into extended family and personal and everything possible about your family. And when the report came out favoring me as the, quote, better parent, we tried to present that in court, and that was shut out of court because it didn't go the way they wanted to. I thought we would just end up with a shared custody. All right, she's not so horrible, he's not so horrible. We all have faults. I have faults too. And we'll just share custody, 50-50. We each have a job, and we'll go on with our lives. I was told by the judge at the time, well, if you come in front of me, we don't do that. One person wins and one person loses. And in the back of my mind, I'm saying,
why does it have to be that way?
You know, exactly, because then the child loses. And when they say the best interest of the child, how is the best interest of the child having one parent, whether it's the mother or the father, only see that child Wednesday for dinner and every other weekend? That's not being a parent by any stretch of the imagination. You're a visitor.
A visiting uncle.
Exactly. I mean, if you're not there when your child comes home from school happy or sad and helping with homework, you're not a parent. And what it does is it just removes you from the child's lives, and what it really does is it turns you into an ATM, because that's the only reason anybody wants to ever deal with you anymore, is when it's about money.
When the court system has apparently followed you for your money, or followed you for what you could provide rather to them or to the system, rather than provide for your family. So when the children are not attached to you any longer, now you're the ATM you describe.
Yeah, that's a good point, because when I say ATM, I was actually referring to the ex-spouse, in my case my ex-wife, telling the children, your father is court ordered to pay for your extracurricular activities. He's court ordered to pay for your college. But what you're saying is actually true too. If there's shared custody, really nobody benefits. The lawyers don't get the benefit because they can't fight it out in court. The forensic psychologists don't, because you're sharing.
It's a big money grab.
And then what a lot of people don't realize is when one person's awarded child support, it goes through the child support agency. Well, they charge a yearly fee to manage, quote, this money. They're also floating the money for a month. So you have tens of thousands of parents paying millions of dollars every year in child support, and that money is being floated. So this is actually a big money maker for them. There's a financial incentive to make one parent pay, and what ends up happening almost all the time is the parent who makes more money ends up losing custody and paying child support.
I had the opportunity to look at the floor debate, the minutes of the floor debate, and in some of the language that the legislators were used, they were primarily Republicans that were against the Child Support Standards Act, were claiming that what is this money that's going to go into the system, who's collecting interest on that money, and that's an unfair representation to remove a father's ability to pay, or a mother. In that case, most of them, I think, the awards were 90%. So the money was coming out of that system, going into the government. They were funding whatever they wanted to fund with the small float on the money.
Right. I mean, it's just sad to think that it's not really a stretch to say that they're selling our children. You know,
it's not a stretch.
Because it's what it is. And if they did change the system to what it should be, the author Linda Gottlieb, she promotes the shared parenting, and she believes that that is the best interest of a child. And in fact, there may be some money going back and forth to equalize the field a little bit, so that one parent doesn't have so much more than the other parent. But it's just it can't be so overwhelming to the non-custodial parent.
I don't know how she would describe it in a book, but one of the things that concerns me is that the legal profession has stepped in and overwhelmed the psychological profession over that issue, because that's not the way any parent would want it. We wouldn't want the legal system to acquire the ability to have power over the kids. We would want a psychologist or psychology to determine what is best in the best interest of the children.
Right, and as you've said on other shows, if you have two fit parents and they were fit for the 10 years or 15 years before the divorce, all of a sudden you file for divorce, and now you're an unfit parent and you can only see that kid. And if you truly are an unfit parent, a pedophile, or you physically abuse or mentally abuse the children, you shouldn't have any unsupervised visit. But to chop you down and take away your parental rights, we have a right to enjoy our children.
Should be. You should stop right there, because that is what it should be. We don't have that.
We don't have it here.
In order for us, we should pass this language along to our legislators when we get to talk about joint custody again. The court is creating an abnormal view of how family is by doing all these things that they do to the parent when they divide up and send the kids off. This was a comment, you and I were talking about. I just remembered that you said that. To me, it hit home. This is an abnormal world we're living in.
Right. It's setting up. It's setting the child up for a bad future. And what I mean by that is when the court order says that the parent who's the non-custodial parent is responsible for, say, extracurricular activities. In a normal marriage, if your child would come home and they weren't doing well in school, they were cutting, misbehaving, you would say, you know what, you're not taking karate class, you're not going to bowling.
You'd be able to manage it yourself.
You can manage it. Now what happens is, well, the custodial parent isn't paying for it, so they say, you have to do it anyway. And to me, a big example is college. When you do these court orders, now if both parents went to college, the judges make you put in the court order that the parent will pay for a 4-year college, usually the non-custodial, or they'll share the rights. And what does that tell the child when they're told that, look, your parent must pay 80% of your college? That's not the way it should be. It should be, hey, if you work hard and you earn it, let the parents make the decision whether the child should go to college or not. When you're in college and you know it's paid for,
it's a free ticket. There's an entitlement base built into the system.
I actually think that's a good way. It really is teaching your child entitlement, and they actually say it. I mean, my children have said, when I taken away my son's car, and they said, well, if you don't give me back my car, Mom's going to go to court and they're going to make it give you the car back. And I said, well, you didn't follow the rules of the car. We have an agreement. Believe it or not, they went to court, and I was told by the law guardian, you must give your son the car back.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's just unbelievable. And what is that teaching? What is that teaching him in the long run?
What does it do for children to be absent this role model that they lose in a divorce? Because there's no sole, it's almost all sole custody. There's hardly any joint custody awarded by the court. Well,
I'm not sure the exact statistics. From what I've read, I believe it's approximately 90% of the young men in jail were raised without a father in the household. Right. So whether it's 90% or 85%, it's a very high statistic.
It is. Yeah.
When women aren't raised with a father, they crave that parental need. It's almost all the time what happens is they end up dating an older man that's trying to fill that gap of having
or they become more promiscuous as more teen.
Definitely more promiscuous. Yeah. And also there's a dynamic in the family where one parent is usually the disciplinarian and the other parent is a little bit more permissive. But when you're living together and both parents are involved, it sort of works its way out, and there's an equilibrium and it works out. But when you have no push and pull, it's just all. And what happens a lot of times is you realize in the court system that if you say no, your child will pick up the phone and call the law guardian and say, and I've had this in my case where my daughter said, if you don't let me do this, I'm going to call my lawyer, because that's what their law guardian, court-appointed lawyer told them to do. And then you say, you know what, maybe I shouldn't say no, because it will come back to bite me in court. And you really can't be a parent when you're under this microscope.
No, you can't. And there's a supervised visitation?
The supervised visitation, I mean, I think to me, it's a horrendous thing. And again, that goes back to the money trail, because they'll say, well, now you need supervised visitation, which if you're a bad parent, you know what? You should be arrested if you're a pedophile. But supervised is okay. And what they do is then they ask the supervising person who's being paid $80 to $100 an hour for the supervised visit to send a report to the court and let the courts know when it's time to end the supervised visitation. Well, that's cutting the hand that feeds you. There's no incentive to stop this. And also, what message? A lot of times, for example, in my case, where my ex-wife withheld my children from me for no reason, parental alienation, she wouldn't let me see my children. And when I took her into court, the judge said to me, well, I'll tell you what, until we have a court date, which will be months down the road, I'll give you supervised visitation. I said, what message does that send to the children that they have to be in a supervised environment with me?
I affectionately call that parenting in a box, because that's basically what it is. You're inside. They look at you. They check you out to make sure you're acting whatever type of appropriate they think is appropriate.
Right.
And your behavior is no longer yours. It has to be some model that the court has developed for you.
Right.
And if you act accordingly, then you'll be what?
I mean, exactly.
Extended for another year?
Right.
To act like a dope or somebody that you're not?
I mean, why the government and people parent differently? People we were brought up, parents spanked us. Now, we don't spank children, but there is a whole continuum on how people parent their children.
And all kinds of different things.
The government shouldn't be involved in telling us how to raise their children. If you're listen, you can't stop people from having children and say, you know what, we don't believe you'll be a good parent, and you don't just go taking away children.
Like when I was a kid, I mean, we were punished by our parents, and I don't think there was any reason why. I'm not a thief or any kind. Neither was any of my friends. I think we all did
turned
quite
out
well. But I think there's more dysfunction now in the divorce arena than there is outside.
I mean, if you just look at the jails, it's filled with
like you said, the fatherless.
Filled with, of course, a lot of it's fatherless because traditionally that's the disciplinarian. Mm-hmm. You take away the disciplinarian, you're asking for somebody to be a child to be out of control. Just the whole system just really prepares children for a bad future. And what does it teach them about relationships? That the one parent can be tossed away and turned into a visitor. That's going to continue down to the next generation.
What is this is a conversation you and I had a note about, what is the right way to act when you lose your children? I mean...
it's an interesting question because a lot of people... I haven't seen my children now for about nine months this go around. And, when you don't see your children, it's almost like they were murdered by a family member. I can't see them
or apprehended
kidnapped,
somehow, jailed,
right.
Who knows what.
They're out there. I don't know how they're doing. I don't know
Which is certainly not doing you any good.
It's right. It's
affected you as a parent. Your mental health is now being affected. Right. Whereas prior to that, you probably wouldn't have never faced this issue. Never.
And then obviously you get it. You go through stages. You're angry that the courts allow this to happen, and then you get into a depression stage. How do you deal with not seeing your children? And when you see other children and family members, or when you see a friend and they say, "Oh, how are your children?" You say, "Well, I haven't seen my children." And they say, and the answer is the same for all of them. Well, why wouldn't you just go to court and tell the judge? Which it doesn't make sense that a judge wouldn't enforce it. Another problem when you're not seeing your child is, some people take the law into their own hands and they may just go fight the ex-wife and grab the children and try to fight the alienation with alienation. If you do it the sane way and the legal way, you go to court and you file motion after motion after motion. Then what happens is the judge labels you as litigious.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you're the bad guy.
Frivolous litigation.
Right, for filing to see your children. And then in my case, I was told, you're litigious. You keep filing motions. I said, Your Honor, I only filed to see my children.
Ladies and gentlemen, I just have to let you know, this is absolutely what does happen. You shouldn't be surprised by this. This is it's fairly normal, unfortunately, that a lot of people get tossed around as he's been tossed around. And it's not unusual. We'll go to court, and someday, hopefully, you'll never find that out.
I really hope that nobody has to go through what I went through.
And I've had the same thing.
What you went through, Chris. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. And it's something unless you're involved, you cannot believe that a human being, a judge, would do this to a child.
Let's talk about the criminality of it. I mean, you're a criminal. When you're divorced, the court treats you like a criminal. It is a divorce court, but it's also based on the English way of accusing people and having somebody oppose one another, and there's a litigious aspect to family court that people just don't expect.
No,
you didn't get married in court. You figured, well, I got married in church. Why would I be going to court to get divorced? Why couldn't I go to a church to get divorced? Let's talk about, just to continue this a little bit more, the scam of law guardians.
There's what they do is that they call them now attorneys for the children. And when you go into court, again, this goes back. They always say, when you want to see corruption, follow the money.
Right.
What happens is when you go to court, the attorneys, when you have a child, they appoint the children an attorney. And the reason I say this is a scam, because now what this attorney for the child does is they simply ask the child. It could be a 6-year-old, a 5-year-old child. They call them into their office. They say, "I'm your attorney. Nice to meet you. Here's my business card." They say, "Who would you like to be your parent? Who would you like to have custody of you? Who first of all, who would?" If I did that, they would say, "How disgusting of you to ask your child to choose one parent." So they say, "Well, you pick which parent you'd like, and I'm here to fight for you, whether it's right, whether it's wrong." So you're asking, number one, the other parent to push because you want your child to say the right thing. The law guardians hand them their card, and they say, "Look, if the one parent does anything to upset you, call me." In many cases, the attorney for the child becomes aligned with one parent. In alienation, it becomes aligned with the targeting parent, and they start to gang up on the other parent. What also happens, I think, most of the time in courts is that the attorneys, the judges, they get to choose the law guardian for the case or the attorney for the child. They pick the attorney. They tell them what they want the outcome to be going into it. In my case, I have Judge McNulty. She appointed a law guardian that she's friendly with. They had ex parte communication, and it was that the road was laid before I got there that this was what was going to happen, no matter what was said. The law guardian was going to go along with the judge and guide the children into it. Meanwhile, you're paying for this law guardian.
To me, it looks like what they do is they go in the back room and they have this pegboard, and they just decide what pegs to fill. Well, I mean, it sounds strange, but what I'm trying to say is they basically kind of plan out your future based on the limited amount of information and the desire to put you in financial jeopardy.
I think a lot of times, which I didn't know till I actually wouldn't believe till I got into the system, is how much politics is involved in the judicial system, and who
plays golf with who and all that stuff.
The attorneys, they all donate to the judges' campaigns because judges are elected, and they donate. They're friends personally. Many times they work together. So it's a matter of if you have the right attorney who knows the right judge. If everything was equal, it's usually the man who loses, the father who loses custody and is relegated to his every other weekend visitation. There are women who certainly lose custody, but many times it's for political reasons.
What were you referring to when we talked about the judges rewarding alienating parent by not making them give back the time they stole? It was interesting. We never heard it spoken like that.
Right. In my case, my children were withheld for over a year. And we finally had a court date, and the judge said, "Okay, you finally, against my," she was sort of pushed into enforcing my agreement, and said, "Okay, now I'm going to enforce the agreement. I'm going to fine you every time the children don't go." But I had just lost a year with my children. I lost my son getting his my daughter getting her driver's license. I missed birthdays. But people don't, this is not a game. You can't get this back.
Right.
When I lose my child turning 16 or 13 or these milestones, graduations, you can't get that time back with your child no matter what. But at least, punish the other parent. Say, you withheld the child for 6 months, for a year. The other parent's now going to get that time back as best you can. But they don't. They just let it go away. Okay, we're going to go forward.
Not only do they have the free ticket and the entitlement, but they also get the punishment free ticket.
As you know, as a parent, time is so precious with our children.
Sure.
It just goes so fast. Once they go off to college, you can just never get those time. And many times, as in Amy Baker's book and in Linda Gottlieb's book, they say that the children will come around. We don't know what the triggers are. But in a percentage of the cases, some of the children will come around and realize they were alienated. But even when they do that, you can't get back that bonding time as a child. I can't explain the heartache of losing that time. Every day that goes by, the pain is it's almost unbearable that you lose that time with your children.
Quick example is when I was divorced, my son I was being told that my son was in the baseball league that he was in. He was a good player, and I played professional baseball. I should have been able to help my son, don't you think, right? And because I was being told that he was the star of the team, quote unquote, when I actually got him to see what he could do, I could see he couldn't do anything. They were keeping me from knowing the truth because they didn't care much about what kind of positive influence I could have had for him.
Well, probably they didn't think you had any part of positive influence on them.
Well, you know,
they couldn't see it.
It's just not work. It just doesn't work. It doesn't matter what you do. You take that parent's input away, and it's not input anymore. Right. There's nothing you can do about that. Let's talk about the terms that you used in this conversation we had before. I took the notes on it. The legal process is counterintuitive as it relates to a parent being forced to pay things the child wants. I know we hit on that a little bit before, but the counterintuitive aspect is interesting to me.
It's just not real. I mean, first of all, getting a divorce to begin with is certainly not good for the children to be raised with one parent, all the time, and you're involving step parents and boyfriends and girlfriends. So right off the bat, it's not a good situation. But the idea is let's make the best of the situation by doing as close to 50-50 as we can. And especially when I say counterintuitive, when you have a father who wants to be with their child, and the court's saying, no, you can only see that child every other weekend. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, we're fighting in communities that children need role models. They need their father, and they have all these programs to keep fathers involved. Yet when you go into family court, one parent's going to be removed. The mother or the father is going to be removed. And you really need, if there's no incentive to take away one parent, I think the parents will work together better, and if they knew that if you didn't work together, you were going to be the one to lose custody.
Yeah, a little sidebar on this whole thing. Talk about an incentive when you place the kids in that mediation environment. Because I'm a divorce mediator, I got to tell you, there hasn't been one couple that has asked for sole custody.
It's actually interesting that you mentioned that.
They're all asking for joint custody, so it's easy to work out when they both want it that way.
And I think what's interesting is that when a father or a mother is ordered to pay child support, the rate of going back to court is something in the neighborhood of 80%.
Relitigation rate.
Relitigation because they didn't pay the bills.
Right.
When you do it through mediation and both parents agree, and it's a number that they can live with because that's why they agreed to it.
They agree, that's exactly right.
It's reversed. It's 80% compliance.
Yeah.
So you're not back in court. The parents are getting along, and you know what? You can go on with your life, Chris.
I've been doing for 10 years. I haven't had one couple come back to court.
You want to go on when you get divorced. You want to go on with your life.
You own the product when you create it. You own it, and then you live by it. There's a secret of mediation. I think one of the secrets is that you get them to agree, not by force. They're actually wording the agreement. They're actually creating it, and that has way more power than any kind of enforcement could ever create.
I mean, you have to have a plan that you can live with. Right now, the non-custodial parent...
Right, and so many of the plans we get are not there.
They're not livable. They don't look at the non-custodial parent's cost of living.
Exactly.
And you can't be in a basement while the child's going with the other parent in the house that they used to live in. The children are not going to want to visit you in your basement.
And we've had many many litigants have complained about that's where they have to live because they can't really afford.
Right.
People are not aware of the confiscatory nature of the percentages either.
No,
they're on gross before tax dollar percentages. Those applications are not workable.
Also, in this economy, I mean, we don't have to tell you that a lot of people aren't making what they used to make.
You notice there's nobody changing the Child Support Standards Act when they really should.
Right, and cost of living is going up, and the wages are generally going down.
I don't like the idea, and it's very true, that you get to feel like you're a criminal. I don't like the idea of, I know because as a divorced parent at one time I did, because they apply so much negative aspects, things you would not agree to you. It feels like you're in jail. It feels like you're being forced into things. It doesn't feel like I've made a choice anyplace.
Right. That's
true. The choices are made for me.
They actually do criminalize you. For example, I mean, I'm 46 years old. I went through the first 40 years of my life, other than a speeding ticket, never being arrested. I never thought I would ever end up having an order of protection or being put in jail. And this turns you into a criminal because people use orders of protection as weapons in court, and it does work. They call it the magic bullet.
Yeah.
You want to get your husband out of the house, you go to court and say, he threatened me, he hit me, I'm scared. he's out of the house and not getting back in.
And we should know, the public should know that attorneys, unfortunately, I do know this for a fact, there's many attorneys that will advise their clients to feign abuse, or feign that they would put a mark, hit it yourself with a pan or something, come in with a mark and go to the hospital, and next thing you know, the allegation of abuse has occurred, and now you're on that one-way path to hell.
I tell anybody listening, this can happen to you. You can have never been arrested, never did anything wrong, and you get involved in a divorce, and you very easily can be taken out of your own house that's paid for and your own property in handcuffs and not allowed back in. It happens hundreds of times a day on Long Island alone.
You know, the idea that the family's future is a concern for me, because you can't, when Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall and put all those cracks in the family, he couldn't be put back together. Right. That's what happens when you're in court. It's like you're just shattered.
You're right.
And the analogy is there that you can't put that back together. It'll never be the same.
You can't get back the missed time. You can't get back the fights. And I think it's important, going back to the law guardians. Yeah. A child, if they have to choose, they're told you pick one. Well, how does that child now want to feel when they're with the parent that they didn't choose? They're holding a secret back. And you know what? It's not comfortable for them to be with the parent that they know that they just said they don't want to live with.
Right.
So they feel like they're holding a secret. They betrayed that parent. And they're helping break that bond, and it just cannot be, as you said, it can't be repaired, Chris.
That's my problem with it, because I think that I don't recall ever seeing, now that I think about it, anything that went by in a way that they would have planned. They would have ordinarily have planned. But because once you're out of that situation, you're no longer, your operating system is broken down.
It's true. And once the lawyers take control and you're in this track, there's no turning back.
That's a good way to put it.
You can't turn around. It's like a boat that just keeps moving forward, and it just doesn't stop easily.
We got about a minute or two to share on what we think might be a good idea to avoid court, or to avoid this mess.
Right. Well, in my opinion, Chris, if you care about your child, and that's the number one importance to you, which it should be, go to mediation, work it out, work out a schedule that works, where they have maximum involvement with both parents, which really is nice for divorcing couples, because you know what? You are going to start dating again, and it actually works out well. Don't be pushed into everybody saying, if you go to the lawyer, you'll get more money out of them, because you know what? You very well may get more money.
Absolutely.
How much will it cost in pain and lawyers' fees? At the end of the day, your child's going to be damaged. If you care about your child, stay out of court.
Absolutely true. That's the way to go. In mediation, and actually the family has a better chance of surviving, because the agreements are being made with them involved. Right. It's not something anybody's forcing upon you. Thank you very much, Gary Jacobs. I appreciate that. It was a good program. You've been watching FIT TV, the program that brings you behind the scenes of our divorce culture. At FIT, we know you cannot get this information on your own, so we'll bring it to you every single week. My name is Chris Dimaggio. Thank you for watching FIT TV, and we'll see you again next week.